Hi, on this Friday afternoon.
Hello, everyone.
We're here on Table Talk. Luke and I, Pastor Gary, is in the air as we speak. Not right here, but somewhere over the Atlantic, if not in Toronto right now. So we're looking forward to having him back this weekend. We, uh, when we think about the good news of the gospel, we can think about how God is the one who He rescued us, that when we were dead in our trespasses and sins, when we followed the foolish ways of this world and were bound by the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who was at work in the sons of disobedience, that we were by nature children of wrath. Ephesians 2:4 says, Luke, that God was rich in mercy. And we wanted to take some time today to think a little bit about being radically generous. This is one of our values that we promote. And often when we hear the word generous, we automatically think about money, but we want to take that to a much deeper level than merely money. So, Luke, as we get started today, when we think about God being rich in mercy, what does that richness look like? And why does that inform us in being radically generous?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that richness looks like is a self-sacrificing nature, self-sacrificing element for God to have, for the Father to have sent the Son into the world is itself a sacrifice. It is a loss. For Christ to have left all that he had in glory to condescend to the earth is a sacrifice. So it isn't merely a giving or a generosity that requires no sacrifice on God's part, or and generosity isn't often a giving that requires no sacrifice. It's one that is a showing of love towards others, to bless others at some sort of cost to oneself.
Yeah, and that language especially in the Gospel of John, is rich. That for God loved the world in this way, that He gave, and that's the gift language. That it's an expression of something that He has given. He's given of His own Son. Paul can talk about that in, I think it's in 2 Corinthians 8:15, where he says, "Thanks be to God for His indescribable gift." And in the context, he's talking about the gift of Christ who's been given for us. Or Paul can say in Romans 8:32, if God, didn't spare His own Son, then how much more will He graciously give us all things? So we have a God who's radically generous.
Yes.
In fact, if I just stop in that idea of being rich in mercy for a moment, when we think about being rich in mercy, I think there's this idea that God is somehow reluctant to forgive, or He's hesitant, and yet being rich in mercy communicates wide open arms and eagerness to display His lavish love. And the New Testament uses that language of He poured out His love and He lavished His love upon us. So that ought to have some pretty radical implications for us as Christians.
Yeah. Absolutely. The call for us to be generous, which is throughout the Bible, that call to Christians is one that, like all other commandments in the Bible, is one that we don't seek to obey out of our own strength. We don't seek to obey those commands in order to earn favor with God, or to earn merit or salvation in any way. Every act of generosity on our parts is one that flows out of the generosity that's already been shown to us by God. So it's we give of what we've already received, and that's fundamentally important when we think of generosity in any form.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder, because what we have to give is not ultimately ours in the first place. It's been given to us by God. We're given these things as stewards to take care of, to use, and to share with others. So I started off by saying, Luke, radical generosity, obviously we think about money, and often we think about money because money and generosity are so tightly linked. But there are so many more ways that we can be generous. What are some ways that when we think about being radically generous, Let's just walk through a couple of them.
Yeah, time is a big one. People often say time is money. To sacrifice one is to have the other, and oftentimes to have one is to sacrifice the other. But both are, in many ways, something that can be sacrificed in the service of other people. And so, ministry, in pretty well all its forms, discipleship in pretty much all of its forms, isn't something that happens quickly. It's not something that can be done conveniently in a short amount of space. It often takes lots of time. Often takes lots of patience over the course of time. And so any act of discipleship, any desire to minister to another person is going to, whether or not it costs you money, is going to cost you time. And if you aren't generous with your time, if you are stingy, you might say, with your time, wanting to protect it for your own enjoyment, then that's one thing that will severely hinder ministry, and one of the ways that it's really important to be generous.
Yeah. We can also think about generosity in terms of our opinions. I know that this has been a time where people, especially on social media, they are very quick to express opinions about all things that relate to government regulations, vaccines. Now we're getting into vaccine passports, where there's legitimate concerns. And yet, Christians can have very different views on those things too. And we can end up being polarized over issues that are not absolutely essential to the good news of the faith.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important as well when we talk about radical generosity that there are issues, some issues we need to be very tight-fisted on. We want to hold them closely. But there are other issues where we need to exercise a lot of patience, and we need to listen and understand people. And radical generosity then goes into, how do I view my fellow Christian and what they believe and what they think, especially when I disagree with them. So we've got opinions, we've got time. What are some other ways, Luke, we can be generous?
Yeah, I think staying in that same vein of opinion, I think that can even go further than that. As we're thinking about God's radical generosity, through sending his son, that was a radical generosity towards those who had sinned against him, against those who had offended him, offended his holiness. And in that same way, I think part of generosity is in our willingness to forgive others. That's huge, whether that's within a church context, whether that's among friends or among family. To be generous is to be willing to reconcile and to extend forgiveness when you've been hurt, to still show love and care to another person, and to seek that reconciliation is another way that we maybe don't think about generosity, but which is really important.
Yeah, that I appreciate you saying that, because even in the word forgive is the word to give. We're giving up the right to get even. We're choosing to not take vengeance upon someone else. We are leaving room for God to deal with issues. And in the end, then, by giving up the right to get even, we are releasing that person from the debt of obligation that we feel that they owe us. There are times where there needs to be compensation for wrongs done. We're not talking about those types of things. There's times where there are consequences for sin, and we're not talking about giving up consequences. But in terms of getting even, that certainly is an important part. As we think about this, I know you're flipping in your Bible. You've probably got a passage that's coming to mind even now.
And another way we can be generous, just moving on to one other one that was in my mind, is with our gifts, with our talents. So I'm thinking of the book of 1 Peter in chapter 4, where Peter encourages churches that he's writing to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So as one is gifted, to use that gifting in the church to show love and blessing and hospitality to others. And he lists a variety of gifts and encourages God's people to be generous with those gifts and to serve one another with them.
Yeah, you mentioned hospitality. Hospitality is another way we open up our homes. It doesn't mean that we've got everything put on the table or everything's fancy. It can be that we share our lives with other people, that we're opening up our homes so that we can have extended, as you talked about with the first thing, the time to just get to know other people. And then by sharing of our lives, Paul talks about in 1 Thessalonians 2 how we didn't just share the gospel with you, but our very lives as well. And so there's a generosity of spirit that exists. Let's just think for a moment about resources. We've taken almost 10, 11 minutes here in this time, and we haven't even touched on resources. What does it look like to be generous with our resources?
Yeah, we do see, we started this off saying, hey, generosity is about more than just money, more than about resources, but we would be remiss to completely dismiss that, because it's also other things. That is still a very important part. The call to give and to be generous is all throughout the New Testament, and surprisingly, it's a call to be generous even when you don't have very much.
Yep.
Paul will talk about those who gave even out of a lack that they have, out of a poverty that they have, and encouraging those people even to give, not only because of the blessings that they actually receive from giving, because it's more blessed to give than to receive, but because that's a calling on every Christian to be generous with resources, with money. Money is one form of resource, so there are others, and that can look a variety of different ways. All of our church ministry here runs on the financial generosity of the congregation. And missionaries need money to do the work that they do, and pretty well every case some sort of financial need is there. And so much of the work of the church today is tied to the giving of those resources.
Yeah. We are grateful. This has been a church in my almost 12 years that I've been here that I've seen incredible generosity from people, and I'm so grateful to God for each of you in terms of the ways that you've given sacrificially. It frees us up to serve full-time in ministry, so we want to say thank you for that.
Yeah.
As a staff, we feel incredibly thankful and blessed to be able to focus our energies to serve you. So thank you for that. We have some really practical ways, Luke, that we just need people's generosity as we're launching fall ministry after a pandemic, after shutting things down and reopening and shutting and opening and shutting again. And so what kind of ways are you looking at specifically? You're ramping up fall ministry with Pastor Gary. What are we needing in terms of people's generosity, and how can people give to the work of the Lord here?
Yeah, absolutely. So setting then the financial giving aside, that's something, as you mentioned, our church has been so wonderfully generous, and that heart is clearly in our church. The needs that we have as we launch fall ministry are very high right now on the giving of time and the giving of energy and of gifting and of experience. And so really all the ministries of this church rely on the generosity of volunteers to spend that time and to give that energy towards the various needs that we have. And so to speak of a few of those, we have lots of needs for Sunday morning, the way things run on a Sunday morning on the more technical end. Those are the volunteer jobs that aren't as visible necessarily, that aren't as sort of obviously apparent as a need, but they are needs to have somebody put the words up on the screen and follow along with that at the computer as the service goes along, to run the soundboard, to run our live stream now, which is a integrally important service that we're offering and doing right now, is the running of the live stream. So we need many people with technical know-how and ability, or at least a willingness to learn to do those things, to help us to continue to have things run smoothly on a Sunday morning, as I've been taking on much more of those responsibilities in the last year. I am now going to be also trying to do children and all of that. So I personally require the support of volunteers in order to make that happen. As well, our children and youth ministry, our family ministry needs many volunteers. There's only so much that 4 staff could ever do with children and youth. We need for sure people to teach, people who are willing to put together a lesson and to come up with crafts and activities for children. And I think teaching is often a pretty overwhelming idea. I think most people would say, oh, I don't think I could teach kids. I don't think I could come up with a lesson. But thankfully, the resources that we have available to us, to teachers, make teaching actually very easy. The lessons in many ways are already kind of prepared for you. And so for anybody who would have any willingness to prayerfully consider teaching, that's probably our greatest need. But the children's ministry also has other needs that don't require teaching. Every classroom needs a helper, and we need hall supervisors as well. And while that may not sound like the most sort of glorious volunteer position, the reality is it's extremely important. As we think about the safety of children especially, one of the most fundamental pieces of the safety of children in the children's ministry are those hall supervisors who are observing and watching and making sure that everything is going the way it's supposed to be. So lots of opportunities, and on the youth side as well. I'm not as familiar with the volunteer needs of the youth, but the youth as well need those. There's going to be many needs in the discipleship of our older children and youth in the congregation.
Yeah, because it's more blessed to give than to receive. I think it's important for people, as you're watching, that as you give of your time and your talents and of your resources, that what happens is that there's a rich blessing for you in that. Mm-hmm. That you grow in grace, you grow in love for the saints, you grow in skill sets, your gifts get expanded. We continually need musicians on Sunday morning. You can talk with Jordan Decker if you'd like to be involved with that. We love to have people who are involved with greeting one another. And while we've narrowed that down at this time, because of the pandemic, we continually need people to be generous in that way. Yeah. We need you to be generous when you're not well, that instead of thinking of yourself, that you're staying home to get better and to be mindful of others. And I'm so grateful. This church has been fantastic in serving one another and not counting our own rights as what is ultimate, but considering one another. So I'm thankful for that. And then finally, I would just say we always are in need of people who are helping out around the property and the building. There are always little repairs needing to be done. We save a lot of our costs instead of contracting everything out. We have people who have gifts and abilities who give. We've got somebody outside right now cutting the lawn instead of us paying for a lawn service. We've had a number of folks do that. They bring their own riding mower and usually on a trailer, and then they cut the lawn. We can always use help in the winter with snow blowing, shoveling outdoors before Sunday. There's just lots of practical ways to love people. And when we think about being generous, the most important thing is it's ultimately us giving so that we could be a blessing to the Lord and to others. And because He has given you a bountiful amount of skills and resources and talents, why not share those? So we're really thankful. We could emphasize money, but there's so many ways in all of life for us to be generous. Luke, thanks for all of your thoughts today, and we hope to see you on Sunday. You can always register. We've always got room in both services, especially 11 o'clock, lots of room. So you can just walk up if you didn't register, and we'll screen you at the doors. And we look forward to worshiping with you on the weekend. So enjoy this Friday, and may you know the God who is rich in mercy to you. So thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.